The alarm cut through the corridor before I even finished tying my boots. I was standing outside the docking bay when the shuttle carrying the princess dropped out of alignment and clipped the outer field. Nothing serious. A hard landing, sparks, a few panicked shouts from the escort team. But I was already moving before the ship stopped shaking, already counting the seconds it would take the ramp to lower, already deciding which direction trouble would come from if trouble decided to show up at all. That is the first thing you should know about me. I don't wait to find out if something is dangerous. I move like it already is. My name is Callum Ashby. I am 23 years old, which apparently makes me a child in the eyes of most of the galaxy, and especially in the eyes of the woman I was about to meet. The ramp lowered with a hiss, and out stepped Vae, crown heir of the Halvanor Compact, humanity's newest ally in a war that had been quietly grinding along the frontier for longer than most people back home even knew existed. She was tall, pale gold in complexion, with eyes that moved like she was cataloging every flaw in the room before she even said hello. She looked at me the way you look at a chair that turned out to be slightly the wrong color. "You are my escort," she said. It was not a question. "Corporal Callum Ashby, ma'am." "Yes." She tilted her head, studying my face the way an artist studies a painting they think is a forgery. "They told me Earth was sending its finest, its most decorated soldier, someone with a legend attached to his name." "That's me," I said. She almost laughed, not cruelly, just surprised, the way you'd be surprised if a puppy told you it could do your taxes. "You're too young to be a legend," she said. I didn't argue. I never argue about that anymore. I just picked up her bag, which she had not asked me to do and clearly did not expect me to do, and said, "This way, ma'am. Command wants you settled before the evening briefing." She followed, still watching me like I might sprout a second head at any moment. I let her watch. People believe what they see, and what she saw was a young man in a clean uniform who looked like he'd never missed a meal in his life, let alone a war. She had no idea what was actually walking beside her. The first 3 days were quiet, at least by my standards. Quiet, for me, means only one attempt on someone's life instead of several. It happened on the second night, in the observation deck of the outpost, when a maintenance drone that had no business being that close to the princess suddenly changed its flight pattern and came in fast, low, and wrong. I didn't think. Thinking is slow. I grabbed her by the shoulder, pulled her sideways, and put myself between her and the drone in the same motion I'd used 100 times before, in places she would never hear about, against things far worse than a rogue drone. It clipped my arm instead of her chest and skidded across the floor, sparking, before the outpost automated defenses finished it off. Vae stared at me, breathing hard, her golden skin gone a shade paler. "How did you move that fast?" "Training," I said, which was true, in the same way that saying the ocean is wet is true. Technically correct, missing everything that matters. She looked at the scorch mark on my sleeve, then at my face, like she was trying to find the crack in the story. "You didn't even flinch." "I don't have time to flinch, ma'am. Flinching is for people who get a second chance if they're wrong." She didn't respond to that. She just kept watching me, more carefully now, the way you watch something you've decided might be more than it appears, even if you can't say why yet. By the 4th day, the questions started coming more often. She would ask about my family, my childhood, the schools I went to, small talk questions meant to fill silence during transport rides between meetings. I answered the easy ones, I did not answer the others. When she asked how I'd learned to move like that, I told her it was standard infantry training. When she asked how many operations I'd been part of, I told her I didn't remember the exact number, which was, unfortunately, also true. "You don't remember?" she said, incredulous. "How can a soldier not remember his own service record?" "There's a lot of it," I said, and left it there. She didn't push, not yet, but I could see her filing it away, the same way she filed away everything else, waiting for the moment the pieces would finally fit into a shape she recognized. That moment came on the 6th day, at the memorial. It hadn't been my idea. The Joint Command wanted to show her the frontier wall, the long stretch of black stone and light where every human name from the outer war was recorded, alongside the names of the first Halvanor soldiers who had died fighting beside us since the Alliance began. It was meant to be a gesture of respect, a way of saying, this is what we've given, and this is what we're willing to keep giving, together. I walked beside her through the entrance, past rows of names stretching farther than the eye could follow, lit softly from beneath so the wall seemed to glow at dusk. She moved slowly, reading names she couldn't pronounce, watching the years listed beside them. "Your species is so young," she said quietly, almost to herself. "Even your oldest heroes barely lived past their 80th year. My grandmother is older than your entire recorded history of space travel." "We make up for it in other ways," I said. She gave me a small, tired smile, the kind people give when they think they've finally understood someone. I suppose you must. So much loss, so quickly. It must be strange, watching your kind burn out so fast. I didn't answer that one either. I just kept walking, hands folded behind my back, the way I always stood when I didn't want anyone reading my face. We reached the far end of the wall, the section reserved for active operations, names still being updated as new information came in from the frontier. This was the section closest to command, the one meant for officers, family members, sometimes press, people who wanted to see the most recent cost of the war laid bare in light and stone. Vaisarn stopped walking. I felt it before I saw it. The particular stillness of someone who has just found something they were not expecting to find. She was looking at a name, my name. Callum Ashby, it read. Beneath it, a service number. Beneath that, a list of campaign designations, more than 20 of them, spanning years. Not months, years. Longer than she would have guessed I had even been alive, based on the face she'd been looking at for 6 days. Besides several of the campaign entries were small marks I knew well. Marks that meant something specific in military record-keeping. Marks that meant a soldier had been listed as killed in action and later revised, following emergency battlefield recovery. 4 of them. 4 separate marks next to 4 separate campaigns, each one a small quiet admission that somewhere out on the frontier, in the dark, in places that never made the news back home, I had stopped breathing, and someone had refused to let that be the end of the story. This is a mistake, she said, turning to me, her voice sharper now, almost accusing, as if I had personally arranged some elaborate deception just to unsettle her. This cannot be you. This soldier has been fighting for years longer than you've been alive. This is some kind of family name, passed down, or a clerical error, or... It's not a mistake, I said. She looked back at the wall, then at me, then back at the wall, like she was trying to make the 2 versions of me line up and failing. Explain, she said, not a question, not a request. A demand, the kind that came from someone used to being obeyed, but underneath it, I could hear something else, something closer to fear. So I told her. I told her that humans measure age differently than her people did, not because our years were shorter, but because so much of what we lived through got compressed. I told her about deep field deployments, stretches of months spent in stasis pods between engagements, so soldiers didn't age through years of transit they'd never remember living. I told her that some of the campaigns listed on that wall had taken place while I was frozen and dreamless, waking only when there was a fight that needed fighting, and that my body had aged through maybe half the years that had actually passed out there in the dark. I told her about emergency trauma revival, the field technology that had become common enough on the frontier that soldiers stopped fearing death the way people used to, because death, out there, wasn't always the end of the conversation. I told her, carefully, without going into the parts that still visited me at night, that I had been brought back from the edge more than once, that the marks on the wall next to my name weren't clerical errors. They were the honest, quiet record of a young man who had been asked to give more than his years should have allowed, and had somehow kept giving it, again and again, because there was always someone behind him who needed one more person standing between them and the dark. You died, she said slowly, like the word itself was unfamiliar in her mouth. 4 times. At least 4 that got recorded properly, I said. Field conditions aren't always great for paperwork. She sat down on the low stone bench near the wall, which I had never seen her do before. Princesses, I was learning, did not typically sit in public unless something had truly rattled them. You let me believe you were inexperienced, she said. You let me mock you. You weren't wrong to be surprised, I said. I look like what I am, young. It's just that, young for us, doesn't always mean what it means for you. She was quiet for a long moment, staring at the wall, at my name, at the small marks beside it, that told a story she was only now beginning to understand. Why didn't you correct me, she finally asked. When I called you too young, why did you let it stand? I thought about that question honestly before answering, because it deserved an honest answer. Because it's easier, I said. People treat you differently once they know. They get careful around you, or they get afraid, or they start asking questions I don't always want to answer. It's simpler to just be the young soldier standing at the door. It's simpler for me, and it's simpler for everyone around me. That's not simple, she said. That's lonely. I didn't have a good answer for that, so I didn't give one. She let the silence sit there for a while, the 2 of us standing in front of a wall built to honor people who mostly couldn't hear the honoring anymore. There was an attack, I said eventually, because it felt like she deserved more than silence after everything she'd just learned. 2 years ago, by your count, a listening post on the edge of contested space. We were supposed to be observers, nothing more. Watch, record, report. The post got hit by a raiding force nobody expected, moving faster and hitting harder than anything in the threat assessments. Most of the team didn't make it out of the first 10 minutes. Vaisarn watched me carefully, not interrupting. I got everyone I could to the evacuation point, I continued. 6 people. I went back for a 7th, our communications officer, who'd gotten pinned near the collapsed section of the post. I found her. We didn't make it back in time before the second wave hit. And that's one of the marks, Vaisarn said quietly, looking at the wall. That's one of the marks, I agreed. They found both of us about 4 minutes after the systems flagged no vital signs. The field team had a working revival unit and enough training to use it right. She made it. I made it. The mark stays on the record because the system logs it automatically, whether or not the story has a happy ending. Does it? She asked. Have a happy ending. I thought about the communications officer who I still wrote letters to sometimes, who had a daughter now, who had gone home and built a life far away from listening posts and raiding forces. I thought about the fact that she got to have that life because someone had refused to leave her behind, even at a cost that the record book only summarized in a small quiet mark beside a name. For her, yes, I said. That's usually enough for me. Vaisarn stood up slowly and walked back toward the section of the wall with my name on it. She reached out, almost touching the stone, then stopped herself, like she remembered at the last moment that this wasn't just a monument to her anymore. It was a person standing right beside her. On my world, she said, legends are built over centuries. A person spends 100 years becoming wise, another 100 becoming skilled. And by the time they're considered a legend, they've usually stopped fighting altogether, because legends are meant to be protected, not spent. We don't really get that luxury out here, I said. No, she agreed. I can see that now. She turned to face me fully, and for the first time since she'd stepped off that shuttle, there was no condescension in her expression. No amusement, no doubt, no careful cataloging of flaws. Just something quieter, something that looked a lot like respect, freshly earned and still a little uncomfortable to wear. I owe you an apology, she said. You don't, I said. You didn't know. That's exactly why I owe you one, she said. I judged what I could see instead of asking what I couldn't. That's a poor habit for someone who is meant to lead people someday. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. The way soldiers do when a conversation reaches a place words don't fit comfortably anymore. We stood there a while longer, the light along the wall shifting slowly as the sun outside the dome began to set, casting long shadows across all those names, human and Halvanor alike, people who had given pieces of themselves, sometimes all of themselves, so that other people could keep standing in places like this one, having conversations like this one. Will there be more marks? She asked eventually. Beside your name, in the future. It was a fair question. I'd asked it myself, quietly, more than once. Usually in the dark, usually when I couldn't sleep. I hope not, I said. But I won't pretend I know for certain. Nobody out here gets that kind of certainty. You take the assignment in front of you, you do the job as well as you can, and you try to make sure that if your name gets a new mark beside it, it's because you were standing between someone and something worse, not because you got careless. That's not much comfort, she said. It's not meant to be comfort, I said. It's meant to be honest. She almost smiled at that. A small, tired, genuine thing, different from every polite diplomatic expression she'd worn over the past 6 days. I think, she said slowly, that Earth really did send its finest. I simply didn't understand what that meant until I saw it written in stone. Most people don't, I said. That's sort of the point. We're not really trying to be legends, we're just trying to make sure the people counting on us get to go home. The evening briefing was starting soon, and there were guards waiting near the entrance to escort her back, but she didn't move right away. She looked at the wall one more time, at my name, at the marks beside it, at the years listed that stretched further than my face suggested they should. Corporal Callum Ashby, she said, reading it aloud like she was testing the weight of it now that she understood what it actually carried. I will not underestimate you again. You weren't wrong to be careful, I said, just wrong about which direction the danger was pointing. She laughed at that, a real laugh this time, short and surprised, like it had escaped before she could decide whether it was appropriate. We walked back together, past all those names glowing softly in the dimming light, human and Halvanor side by side, a long quiet record of everyone who had given something, so that the people behind them didn't have to. She didn't ask me any more questions about my past that evening. She didn't need to anymore. She'd read the answer for herself, carved in stone, glowing beneath her feet the whole time she'd been walking beside someone she thought she already understood. I still don't think of myself as a legend. Legends, to me, always sounded like something finished, something looked back on from a safe distance. I'm not finished. I'm still standing at doors, still counting exits, still moving before I know for certain whether something is dangerous. Because out here, waiting to find out is a mistake you rarely get to make twice. But I understood, walking beside her that evening, why the wall kept my name updated, instead of retiring it to some quiet corner of history. It wasn't there to tell people I was done. It was there to remind them that some of us never really get to be. And somewhere out on the frontier, past the light of that wall, there was always another door worth standing at.